Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and continue on with the offseason, still making our way through June. Obviously not a whole lot of development, so we're kind of working with little information per standard. You guys have kind of gotten used to me making that excuse to open every show for the last month or so. A lot more of that, so we'll talk about Michael Floyd once again because he is the only one making news in Minnesota. I think that there are some takeaways and some things that we can talk about with that whole situation, given that the Vikings are supporting his claim. And Drew and I last week made it pretty clear that we weren't really we were a little skeptical, let's put it that way. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll also talk about some surprise starters. This is going to be more of a predictive type segment. A lot of just kind of our ideas, what we think so far. Obviously, a lot of it is very speculative, so it's just kind of fun banter, let's put it that way. And then we'll finish up by having our takeaways from the NFC North rankings, a segment that we've been doing for the last month or so, and also a take 5 on our favorite places that we have personally traveled to throughout our young lives. So let's kick into that right after we do the advertising. Same thing as usual. Brandon Gay, my guy, local comedian, UST graduate, has been working down at Second City. He's now a stand-up comic doing a 52 for 52, meaning 52 cities and 52 performances. So he's been on the grind for sure. Make sure to catch his stand-up special. He's recording live at the Joke Joint in Lilydale, Minnesota, right on the border of St. Paul in that Mendota Heights area. So it should be pretty accessible to most of the guys listening to our podcast. Use the promo code Brendan, all caps, BRENDAN, on the Joke Joint website or his website, BrendanBeingBrendan.com, to get your tickets 40% off. That's a cut from $18 down to $10 just for listening to the About the Labor podcast. So you're welcome in advance. Make sure to check out the show. It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you have any questions, you can ask me or check out Brendan's Twitter, BrendanGay92. And we'll get back to some Vikings football now. Let's talk Michael Floyd, Drew. Last time we talked to Michael Floyd, it was the conversation seems to have certainly transitioned away from him having an alcohol abuse issue to him possibly getting away with something that he really should have been more aware of, which is a point that I kind of drilled home on our last conversation. Right. It seems like he's going to kind of get away with this, whether it was booze related or whether he really was just chugging kombucha tea. It seems like he's actually going to get off the hook. If you haven't read the news lately, if you haven't checked your Vikings alerts, Michael Floyd, his sentence has been recommuted back to Arizona, so he will not be with the team. Obviously, he will be back down there serving the rest of his sentence at home in Arizona, and then he will also have to spend 1 day in jail. Just one day, that's it. And the team is fully supporting him, fully backing him, so it seems like he's going to be in Vikings purple and gold wearing that number 18 after all. So I guess, Drew, what do you think about this?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I took away, first of all, is that the Vikings, as an organization, were so adamant, I guess, in backing him. It seemed like that's kind of a weird stance to take here. Obviously, we don't know everything that happened, and the team kind of has that insider information on it for sure. But this is a weird situation in which a guy is, clearly violating the terms of a house arrest, and especially when it's an alcohol-related thing. It's just weird to see a team back him. So I that kind of tells me that this was a fishy situation and that Floyd maybe wasn't entirely at fault. Obviously, he needs to be aware of what's entering his body, but
that's kind of the biggest thing, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, it seems like the team was almost suggesting him to drink that. Is really what they're kind of that this was what their stance tells me. Is that this is kind of something that the team wanted him to be doing.
And not just
and
him
maybe
either,
the team didn't
like.
know.
You know what I'm saying? It seems like the Vikings are kind of on the train, the kombucha train. Like they're having all their players drink it. So I think it would be interesting just kind of to check out the health benefits of drinking this stuff. Because if the Vikings are supposedly, I thought this was pretty funny, Mike used the terminology that wasn't exactly great. They have kombucha on tap in the Vikings facility.
Mike Florio, right?
Yeah, so I mean that's just interesting to me. I mean, you think that one thing that I drove home last time, like I just said, was the awareness aspect. Mike needs to be aware of what's going into his body, but you'd think that the Vikings should be aware of what's going into Mike's body too, given that they're aware of the situation, obviously. They know exactly, what the terms of his house arrest and just that whole situation were. And yet they have this stuff made it readily available to a guy that, it says right on the back. I can't remember who tweeted it, but someone tweeted a picture of like the back of a kombucha tea can. I thought it was kind of weird that it's in a can, by the way. But it said on the back of it that it should not be used for people that are trying to avoid consuming alcohol. Like, it literally labels it. Like, it says on the can, it says something like, if, for example, your religious beliefs prohibit you from consuming alcohol, don't drink kombucha tea because...
Oh, I see.
It's something in the fermenting process where it somehow translates to, hurt your BAC. So... I just think it's interesting that the Vikings weren't aware of this, because I just hammered Mike on the last show for saying that he should have been aware of the situation. He should have been aware of what's putting into his body. But man, the Vikings, are you guys kidding me? Like, you have to be aware of what you're putting into your players' bodies. Like, that should be, that's got to be top tier for, level of importance for the organization, making sure they know exactly what's going into their players' bodies. And I just, I'm sure there are health benefits to it, but for Mike's situation, it just really clouds it even further. I mean, we said last show that this is a very fishy situation, and you reiterated that on your opening statement here. But man, how much fishier can it get? This is kind of becoming the story of summer for the NFL.
Right. I mean, the way it sounds is that the team was either suggesting him to drink this or. It was something that he was recommended by somebody within the organization. And so otherwise, I mean, why else would the team back him in this?
What do they have? That's a good question right there. What does the team have to gain by supporting him?
Exactly. I mean, the only thing that's the only answer to me is that, the team endorsed, Michael Floyd drinking this at some point. Kind of, it was a suggestion for him. And so they have to stick by that, because they're not just going to kind of, that's really leaving Michael Floyd out to dry then. So if they abandoned him there. So, that's my takeaway. Obviously, we don't know exactly what went down, but by putting together context clues, that's kind of what I'm putting together here. So
that's really all we can do right now is use context and apply it to the situation and try to gain a further knowledge which is, it's still a very sensitive situation. I think we should, make that clear one more time, is that this is a type of situation where we were 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Michael Floyd, the alcoholic. And now 2 weeks later, we're talking about maybe the team is just kind of, they fumbled it to use a football term here. It's a weird dynamic. It's a weird situation. It's very strange, just overall. And I think that we'll know more as the summer progresses. But I guess this is something that Tyler Haig brought up to me on a podcast that I appeared on with him. Really good Vikings guy. If you want to check out his stuff, he's on Twitter. He does good work on that. He asked me a question. Does this say anything about Laquan Treadwell? And the Vikings' belief in him? Because, like we just said, why would the Vikings go to bat for Mike Floyd? The number one answer that I have for that is why would they go to bat for him is because, for one, they're going to die on this hill. They signed him. They made their bed. They're going to lie on it. The second thing is the point that you brought up already, is that maybe the Vikings are really the ones at fault here, and they would be hanging him out to dry had they not supported him. Those are the two obvious answers here, which have nothing to do with Laquan Treadwell, but the kind of the shadowy answer, like the question where we'll probably never get a true answer to this, but are the Vikings thinking, Treadwell's not progressing as hoped, and maybe some of these highlight videos and stuff of him kind of being the star of OTAs and whatnot are a little bit overblown and kind of specific? They're not including the problems that he's possibly having.
Right.
This is obviously entirely speculative, and it's really just trying to pull like something weird out of basically a nothing situation that seems pretty concrete at this point. But does this say anything about Laquan Treadwell? I tend to lean towards no, just because like I said, it'd be kind of ridiculous, I think. But I don't know.
I mean, I hope it doesn't mean anything, I hope it doesn't have anything to do with Laquan Treadwell.
I hope it has nothing to do with football. Seriously.
Right, exactly. I mean, if a team is making a decision, on this type of serious issue where a guy's had serious alcohol problems in the past and he needs to stay sober during his house arrest, that's pretty serious stuff. And if you're basing which stance you take on his football talent on the field, and then kind of how your third wide receiver on the depth chart is going to shake out, that'd be a pretty terrible move for an organization to make. So I really hope that's not actually.
I'm going to say it's not. I'm going to go on record saying that's not the case. I just wanted to bring that up because I think that I'm trying to, connect, like we said, context clues, connect storylines, try to figure out what's going on here when in a situation where we can't really figure out what's going on because it's just so weird. It's so strange. So, I'm with you, Drew. I don't think it says anything about Laquan Treadwell, but that's maybe something to.
It is clear. It is clear that, at least to me, it's pretty clear that somebody in the Vikings organization has seriously screwed up here. Because I mean, you can't. I mean, even if this stuff is available to the guys, that's fine. But you bring a guy in with Floyd's history and his situation.
There should be a sign
that beverage should be the first thing that comes to your mind.
There should be a sign on the jug that says it should say Michael Floyd, do not touch this. Something like that.
Exactly.
He should have been. Someone screwed up. That's probably the best takeaway here is someone screwed up. Hopefully it wasn't Michael Floyd, and hopefully the screw up wasn't something horrid. Let's put it that way. I feel like this is the type of thing where 10 years from now something weird might come out about a trainer that screwed up and covered it up swept something under the rug. This is that type of weird scenario where something can happen like that. So let's just hope it's not that case, and that my other takeaway here is that the Vikings are pretty keen on Michael Floyd contributing to this team. Like I said, they made their bed and they're lying in it, but the fact that they are lying it says that they expect Michael Floyd to make this roster, which I think we agreed was kind of a no-doubt situation. But at the same time, there are people who are kind of skeptical whether he would make this team if Treadwell has progressed as he has. And it seems like he's become kind of a lock through this situation, given the Vikings' support of him, all of that kind of stuff. So the major takeaways for me here, someone screwed up, and that Michael Floyd is an important piece to this puzzle. So I would say keep an eye on him moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, this kind of, how I feel about Laquan Treadwell being a third receiver. So this news that maybe it wasn't Floyd that screwed up and that maybe it was someone in the Vikings organization, in terms of, pure football, speak here, it makes me feel a lot better about the Vikings offense and that wide receiver group if Michael Floyd can play. Obviously, we know how, we feel a lot better, too, about Floyd and his alcoholism, or I guess that's a pretty strong term to say, but you know what I mean.
His history with alcohol, whatever it is. Yeah.
It suggests that it wasn't purely his decision, which is obviously a good thing. But I'm saying from a pure football standpoint, I also feel a lot better about the Vikings offense if Floyd is able to play. So. Yeah,
I'm definitely with you there. Co-sign on that statement, absolutely. So let's move on here to this next segment, the surprise starter. Like I said, this is something we took from Bleacher Report, another aggregate article where they went on and they chose a surprise starter for each organization. The guy that they went with for on Bleacher Report is Pat Elflein, obviously the center of the Vikings selected during the second day of the draft. I think we all kind of expected him immediately from the point that he was drafted that he was going to start, so I wouldn't really consider this a surprise.
No.
It's definitely a safe pick. It's something that would satisfy the masses, I think, in terms of not being outrageous. So there is that aspect to it, but like I just said, it's not really a surprise to me if Pat Elflein starts. So do you have, a better pick from your vantage point of a guy that, might be a surprise starter for the Vikings, whether it's early in September, mid-October, all the way at the end of the year?
The one that I think of right away is Jaleel Johnson. And I know that, Dayton Jones was brought in to be a 3-tech. Obviously there's Will Sutton was brought in to contribute along the defensive line and the interior. And Tom Johnson's back, I believe, as well. So there are a bunch of names there, but, I've always liked Jaleel Johnson's game. I thought he, as a 4th-round pick, that was, he was sitting around and waiting for his name to be called too long. He has a lot of talent. He's got, we went through all of this during his, during draft season.
Right.
Everything he brings to the table. He's got potential to be both against the run and against the pass, a special player. So I see him as a great kind of sidekick to Linval Joseph. So I think Jaleel Johnson's kind of my pick as a 4th-round rookie to get the starting nod in the middle there. A couple other names I could think of. I think Elijah Lee's one that's kind of a real dark horse there at that linebacker spot. And then, depending on what the offense does, if they do, how many tight ends and running backs, receivers they do. But you could see Bucky Hodges at some point this season kind of getting the name as far as if they do a 2 tight end starting unit there. So those are just a couple names, and it's funny that I picked all rookies, but those are 3 names for sure.
That's kind of the way to go here, is to go with rookies. So I'm gonna follow along to start off here with another rookie. I think Dalvin Cook. Like I've been kind of boasting throughout the show is I really love Dalvin Cook. I think the expectation should still be that Latavius Murray is the starter week 1, but I think that Dalvin Cook at some point will be the quote surprise starter. I don't know how great of a surprise that really is given his draft status, his pedigree, his overall level of talent, and all the things that we've talked about with him. It should be kind of a no-brainer that he will start at some point. But I think
it'd be more of a surprise than Pat Elflein for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that for sure, because it's basically it's Dalvin Cook versus Latavius Murray and Jerick McKinnon. Pat Elflein, he's just got to beat out Nick Easton at some point, and I feel like that'll kind of be resolved very early during the preseason based off what I have seen from Nick Easton. So so Dalvin Cook is one. I'm going to follow up with you on that 3-tech spot. I think that Datone Jones is a potential surprise starter. I don't think that he could be a type of guy that could be a surprise starter week 1. I think it might not be he might not be a role where he's seeing a ton of snaps, but he could be the guy that lines up next to Linval Joseph to start the season and kind of get that starter tally in his Pro Football Reference file. So he's one of those guys that's kind of on the brink right there with Jaleel Johnson. Obviously, those guys are going to be battling it out for snaps. So that's one guy I would keep an eye on. Elijah Lee, like Drew said, is another guy. That's someone that both of us have kind of harped on as being a very deep dark horse candidate behind Edmund Robinson, who to some degree could be a surprise starter in some people's minds as well, given Emmanuel Lemur's kind of it seems like he had that spot on lock coming in, and now we're starting to see some difference of snaps, and just the coaching staff is looking to find another guy to play at that position. So maybe that's a surprise starter as well. One more that I will throw out, given the circumstance and given kind of the overall feel from Vikings Nation after he was selected, I think that this might be a surprise, but Ben Gideon is a guy that I would say could be a surprise starter at that Mike linebacker spot. So, for example, if the Vikings come out in their 4-3 look, he technically would be the starting Mike linebacker. And I could totally see it. And I could totally see him starting at will, too, if you wanted to throw Eric Hendrickson at that Mike spot and kind of limit his responsibilities on the will side, just to kind of integrate him into the system. So I could see Ben Gideon, possibly getting that surprise starter nod as well. So there are a lot of moving pieces here, and obviously, we're still towards the end of June here. There's a lot of camp battles to do left. There's a lot of practices, a lot of coaching stuff that's going to be going on over the next coming weeks that will determine a lot of these answers. But for now, I feel like that's a pretty good crop of players to kind of be a surprise starter for the Vikes.
I have one more to add here, and I think this one might be a little bit controversial just because I feel like the masses have kind of flipped his position from last year. But Brian Robinson could still be a starter, I think.
This is good,
Yeah, I mean, I think
is he the surprise though, or is Danielle Hunter the surprise?
I think most of the masses expect Danielle Hunter to start, which is why I think
expect, right? Both of us expect Danielle Hunter to start.
I think so. I'm just saying. I think Robinson's very much still a candidate to have that job though, and I think it's just one of those situations where I think maybe the defensive staff sees Hunter as really, really, really good in that kind of rotational role,
most people
and they kind of don't want to maybe, right. I mean, they don't want to expose him too much or, wear him out. I mean, I don't think there's much of an issue with him being, physically unable to take that many snaps given, what he looks like.
It's more of an experience thing with Danielle Hunter. Obviously, we know that he's got the body and the talent to do it. The dude's a Greek god. We're well aware of all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think when
you have a guy that's a veteran leader, a guy that has experience, he's been playing for 10 years. Yeah, I mean, it's very, very possible that Robinson is still starting.
One thing I will say to that point is that Danielle Hunter isn't necessarily the most well-rounded defensive end yet. I've spoke on the show before about how I still think that Everson Griffin is technically the better overall defensive end. I
actually disagree with you on that, but
you disagree with me on that?
Very, very good. I think Hunter. I think his long arms. Griffin doesn't have the long arms that Hunter does. I think Hunter uses those long arms really, really well to kind of set the edge on those outside runs.
Yeah.
I remember specifically that first Green Bay game at US Bank Stadium. I watched him. I rewatched that, and he was electric, I guess, if you want to put it that way. It's not really a flashy, technique to use as a defensive player, but he was very, very good in that game. I remember in particular.
Yeah. So the question that comes kind of off of that, and what I was sort of ramping up to is, Danielle Hunter, is his run defense, has it surpassed Brian Robinson in that regard? Because that would, if we know that he has already exceeded pretty much everyone on the team in terms of pass rushing. I would say that Danielle Hunter is probably the best pass rusher on this team, with maybe Everson Griffin and Anthony Barr being, when Anthony Barr is at his best. Those are the two other guys that I would say are in the conversation with Danielle Hunter. The run defense is really the question that could make him kind of either a starter or keep him in that rotational role at least through a couple weeks of this season. And then also, like I said before, Brian Robinson kind of deserves that veteran benefit of the doubt, at least for a couple of weeks. He's played at a very high level still. It's not like he's really shown a ton of regression. He's been a very quality player, and that's kind of why I think that we've spoken so highly of this defensive end crop, is that, you add a guy like Tone Jones who can split out to that 5 or that 4-eye out there as well. He can play that 7 as well. That's like kind of a drop linebacker. So there are candidates to take snaps away from Brian Robinson, but I do think that this is a guy that will still have an established role. Now, will he be the one to initially trot out onto the field once again this season? I don't know if he's the surprise or if Danielle Hunter would be the surprise, but there's going to be something's going to happen with that dynamic this season. We're going to find out. That's probably a great storyline to follow, honestly, is the Danielle Hunter ascension train. How quickly will he ascend to having 40, 50 snaps a game instead of just kind of that rotational pass rushing role primarily on no doubt passing downs? Will he progress to being the next well-rounded stud 4-3 defensive end in the NFL? That's something to watch this season, I think. So that's a good thing to bring up, and we went on a little bit of a tangent there. So I think that's good. I like that question mark there. I think we know exactly what's going to happen on the right side with Everson Griffin, but we don't know for sure what's going to happen on the left side with Brian Robinson and Danielle Hunter, how those snaps will be split up. So something to keep an eye on, and probably something we'll be talking about as we progress through the summer here. So let's jump into the NFC North rankings. Once again, this is, like I said before, this is a segment we've been doing for about, it feels like it's been about 2 months almost. This is, a little time filler. And this is the final installment of that. We're into our final takeaways. Obviously, last week we did some initial kind of instinctual takeaways, thoughts that we had immediately after finishing up the segment. We talked a little bit about Mitchell Trubisky and just kind of the idea of the Bears, where they were a lot closer than we sort of thought to being a very competitive team. Other than that that one that we've already stated, Drew, let's try not to regurgitate information. Any other major takeaways from after kind of going through your ranks? By the way, fellas, I'll have a spreadsheet of some kind up to list our rankings. So if you guys want to check that out, that'll be up on VikingsTerritory.com. But Drew, you have the floor.
Yeah, I think I think mainly the Packers offense really dominated. I think what the rankings for me anyway. They won quarterback, they won receiver. I think they were second in tight end, with Martellus Bennett being in the mix now. And then the offensive line too. The offensive line is
tackle group is second
clearly, I think the best in the division. So the Packers offense, we didn't really. It's no secret that they're lethal, but I think looking across the board here in the NFC North, I think they're undoubtedly the top group. Obviously, with the exception to the running back position.
And even there,
which they have
potential to move up in that regard.
Absolutely. A couple of rookies that have different but unique and effective skill sets, and then Ty Montgomery as well, moving over from receiver. He actually was pretty effective last year moving over. That was a smooth transition, way smoother than it should be for a guy making that position change.
It says a lot about Ty Montgomery, by the way, that even on a Vikings podcast, we're giving him props for that. His ability to transition away from, let's keep in mind, this is a young player. He hasn't been in the league for very long, so he had been thinking slot receiver.
Right.
All right, now you got to be a running back. and he was able to really do that well. I mean, they were on the brink of not having a running back to the point where they had to transition a guy from the slot into the running back position, and now they loaded up with new running backs. So,
right.
Yeah, to kind of go off of your point here, a takeaway that I have, and I think this is a very obvious takeaway, I just want to make sure it's clear, because it does set up a fun dynamic between the Packers and the Vikings once again, is that if the Packers certainly dominated offense, obviously I disagree with Drew on a couple of those positions, primarily wide receiver was the one that I kind of remember as the position that I thought that the Packers were not quite as good as the Vikings, actually. But it sets up this dynamic where the Vikings are dominant defensively. I think both of us agreed that the defensive line, the Vikings are the best linebacker group, situationally speaking, at least in that 4-2-5 look. They certainly have the best linebackers in the pair of Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr. Cornerbacks are basically second to none, with Detroit being really the only opposition in the division that can kind of compete with them in that regard. And then obviously the safety position, which was a little bit up for debate that we talked about in the last show here. But obviously Harrison Smith in the back end, blue chip quality safety, arguably the best in the NFL. Mm-hmm. The Vikings have pretty definitively the best defense in the division. Packers have pretty definitively the best offense in the division. It sets up a fun dynamic, and it sets up a fun storyline, and it's something to watch. Obviously, these two teams are going to go head-to-head twice. Those games will likely determine the fate of the Vikings. Think about it. The Vikings had beaten the Packers twice last season, for example. I believe they would have been in the postseason.
I think so. Yeah.
So just think about that. It's going to be fun again. It's turning into the black and blue division, which is fun because, like I said, Chicago is filling up that defense with a ton of lethal talent across their defense with Vic Fangio, who I love, and obviously have stated that probably too many times. It's kind of becoming a relationship between me and him at this point. So, like I'm saying here, it's Packers defense is reloading. They're not great, but the Vikings defense is loaded. Detroit has really loaded up on defense. Chicago has loaded up on defense. So a couple things that I would take away from this are, one, that the Vikings are going to compete with the Packers strictly from a football standpoint on that just the defense versus offense dynamic, which it proved. It fell in the Vikings' favor week 2, obviously, with the 17-14 victory. And obviously, offense got the best of the Vikings late in the season in week 16 when the Packers pretty much overhauled us during just the first half, which was weird with that whole Xavier Rhodes, Terrence Newman weird thing that was going on, which honestly probably hasn't gotten enough. We probably didn't talk about that enough.
See, I always thought that was overblown.
Right. But it's something. It's something. It's there. It's a storyline. I guess you take what you can. You take what you want from that. It seems like it's definitely overblown because
people saw. Oh, player does something different than what Mike Zimmer wants, and then the entire internet, Vikings Twitter just freaked out, and it's how dare you disagree with Mike Zimmer? How dare you disagree with what Mike Zimmer said?
We get that same question mark as soon as we disagree with Mike Zimmer as well. So just imagine if we disagree with Mike Zimmer and we get heat from it from Twitter or whatever, the masses, the eggs, the commenters, whoever it is. Yeah. If we get that, just imagine what the players got.
To be fair, Newman got drilled by Jordy Nelson in that first half. So Zimmer was right in this case, but the point stands.
It's interesting because we have seen too that Newman has already been offered a coaching gig with the Vikings whenever he retires. So I think your point about it being overblown, and we are getting off on a bit of a tangent here, but it clearly was kind of like brotherly love, like brothers fighting over something, and one of the brothers just obviously has a higher ranking position in terms of what you're supposed to be doing, and basically this is going to sound weird, but Terrence Newman kind of plays the role of the little brother here, kind of just doing not what the older brother and Mike Zimmer wanted to do, and they got over it after kind of duking it out a little bit, and that seems like what happened there. So getting back to the point here with our takeaways, the Vikings obviously have this stalwart defense. Packers have this unbelievable offense that it's starting to look a lot like that 2009 Saints offense, which basically didn't run the ball at all and just aired it out about 65% of the time. They certainly have the personnel to do that, especially with the addition of Martellus Bennett. That's going to be fun to watch. That's my biggest takeaway, is that we're really setting up for a brutal battle between the Vikings and the Packers. And will the Lions also be with it in this competition to claim the North? I think history tells you no, just because it seems like the Lions always sort of fall to the wayside at the wrong time.
They are the Lions.
They are the Lions, right. But they do have the talent. They will be competitive. But my biggest thing here is that you look at these groups, and I see a lot of purple. I see a lot of the Vikings being the best team, and the one question mark that, for me, that, coming into this segment, we've been talking about, are the Vikings a playoff team still? Are they a 10-6 team, an 11-5 team? Are they a 6-10 team? Are they a 7-9 team? What is this team's, how can we identify this team in terms of their ability to compete both in the division and just on the NFL level? I'm coming away from this thinking the Vikings are probably for sure a 10-6 team barring injury because they are so talented on that defensive end. They can compete with virtually anybody. Obviously a lot of that it comes down to, can Mike Zimmer coach them, and will George Edwards make the right calls? That's something that will be important.
True.
If this team is largely going to win games based off of defense. So there is that. And just overall, we've got a 3-team race, which I think that the Packers are probably the best team on paper right now, just because they have Aaron Rodgers, they have the quarterback. That's the one kind of the difference maker here for me, is why they are the top team, is because they have the quarterback. And he can, he's had trouble with the Zimmer defense in the past, but that's something to watch. And then, Chicago, I just want to say this one more time. I don't want to keep blowing Chicago, but the Windy City, to make a nice weird pun there.
There you go. There you go.
Switching the terminology for that term there. So I just want to say one more time that Chicago is not as bad as we think. And if Trubisky, if he is able to pan out over the next couple of years here, maybe they sit him on the sideline for 2 years here, and he comes out and ends up being a pretty good player. 2 years down the road, this Bears team, as Aaron Rodgers' career winds down, they have the talent on defense. They're missing a cornerback, obviously, but this is a team that could compete. So those are my major takeaways.
All right. This is going to be I'm going to pose another question. I did it last show.
Good.
You're usually posing the questions, but I'll do it this time.
No, it seems like you're taking over the question role.
I'm going to do it for now anyway. But, this is pretty simple. I'd like to get your knee-jerk NFC North predictions 1 through 4 with with records for each team. Not even looking at the schedules, not even looking at anything. Just a 1 through 4. And I think I know what your 1 through 4 is, but like a record would be interesting to hear.
Okay. So I just want to say one more time, and I think you guys should be pretty aware of the date, given that everyone looks at their cell phone all the time now. But it is the end of June here, so these predictions should be taken with a grain of salt, because
absolutely.
Like I say all the time, a million things can happen still, and anything we say on this show, it's basically the opportunity to kind of pat ourselves on the back.
Our predictions here will probably change.
Yes, and I think we reserve the right to change them as well as situations develop.
Oh yeah.
So I will say I think the Vikings are going to be on top of the division. I really do. Ooh. I've been saying this for a couple months here with the guys on my softball team. They always, it feels like every single week they ask me, what do I think the Vikings are going to look like this year? And my answer hasn't really changed. I think this is a 10-6 team with the potential to be 11-5 or 12-4. But given it's the Vikings, I think 10-6 is probably the best way to go, the safest way to go at this point. Just because they do seem to find a way to lose a couple of games that they shouldn't lose every single year. So I'm going to go 10-6 for the Vikings. I'm going to say 10-6 for the Packers as well, with the Vikings getting the tiebreaker somehow. Packers obviously still make the postseason as a wild card team. And I'm going to say 9-7 for Detroit. And at this point, I'm going to say that doesn't get them into the playoffs. I'm going to say that they find a way to lose Week 17 when they shouldn't.
Makes sense.
And that's why they missed the playoffs somehow. And then the Bears, I'm going to say the Bears are actually 5-11. I don't think they're going to be as terrible as everyone thinks. I don't think this is a 2-14 team anymore. I feel like they'll still be drafting top 10 for sure next season because Mike Glennon is Mike Glennon, and that defense still has a lot of kind of development to do. Guys like Leonard Floyd, for example, are going to be a lot better in 2 years than they are this season, I would imagine.
Right.
And they also they don't have a cornerback in a division that's housing some of the very best wide receivers in the NFL, and that probably is going to hurt them down the road, I would imagine. Because Prince Amukamara, good luck against Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Michael Floyd, Jordy Nelson, even Randall Cobb. A lot of these guys, Devontae Adams, Marvin Jones, who I give a ton of crap to, Golden Tate. There are too many wide receivers in this division for Chicago to really compete, but I think they will probably steal one from like Detroit or maybe steal one from Minnesota. I did make the joke already that if the Vikings lose to Mike Glennon at Soldier Field, that Teddy Bridgewater is definitely magic because he's the only one that can win at Soldier Field. So I think that the Bears will find a way to steal a couple, and they'll be a 5-11 team. So again, I'm not like looking at the schedules here and trying and making sure that I have the correct win-loss records based off of what could happen. Like, I don't actually know if 10-6, 10-6, 9-7, 5-11 is possible, but that's kind of what I see for those four teams right now. So one more time, Vikings on top with the Green Bay Packers, tied with them at 10-6, but I think the Vikings get the tiebreaker. Detroit 9-7, competing for a division and wild card title, but not quite there yet. And Chicago 5-11, competing, but not doing enough damage to really be a successful team.
Yeah. Okay. It doesn't surprise me they get the Vikings up top. I'm sticking with Green Bay because of Aaron Rodgers.
Our dynamic, by the way, just pause for one second. Our dynamic has really switched. You're the cynical, pessimistic one all of a sudden, and all of a sudden I'm spouting off rainbows in favor of the Vikings. It feels like we're doing this way too much. So, for our newer listeners, look for this dynamic to switch a little bit. I'm supposed to be the one that's negative all the time, not Drew.
Well, See, this goes back a long time. I've always. I mean, we disagree on who the best quarterback in the NFL is right now.
Sure.
I think it's Aaron Rodgers. You think it's Tom Brady.
Sure.
This is what this is really about. Aaron Rodgers is. I think personally,
it really comes back to that quarterback position. It always does.
He's a top 5 quarterback to ever play, in my opinion. So,
I don't think that's that hot either.
For that reason.
That's not that hot of a take. I don't think. I think that's a good take.
It should not be. Look at. I mean, sure, he's got one ring, but
if you look
at his efficiency numbers, his efficiency numbers, and then just the way he throws the football, like
the things that he's capable
I've never
of
seen
doing.
A quicker release, and he can scramble. He can throw the 80 yards on a dime. He throws the pinpoint lasers on the comeback.
His ability
route.
To extend the play, he's annoying. He just really is. It's going to be. Exactly. He's the Hail Mary king, so he pretty much is magic.
That too.
Yeah.
Which I hate that he actually gets credit for that stuff, but a couple of those throws were actually really impressive.
Yeah, the Richard Rodgers one especially. I mean, credit to Richard Rodgers.
70 yards in the air.
Right. Credit to Richard Rodgers for getting himself into a position where he can basically just use his back to shield the defense behind him, and kind of it also makes them look like fools because they should have been able to get in front of that ball. But that ball was put in position perfectly for someone to make a play, and most quarterbacks can't do that. We saw Brett Favre do that.
His own 30-yard line.
Right.
I mean, quarterbacks
can't do that normally. So he's obviously a generational talent. And so what you're saying, I think, is when it comes down to the quarterback position, the Vikings can't compete. If it's Sam Bradford versus Aaron Rodgers, you're talking about a borderline top 15 quarterback versus a borderline top 1 quarterback. The Vikings can't compete in that regard. So I think that what you're saying here is, I guess I'm interested in your records then. Do you see the Vikings as,
I got, right now, Packers 12-4.
Okay. I
have Vikings 9-7, and we'll give them a wild card just because I should probably be nice with, how pessimistic I'm being right now. So Vikings at 9-7 and a wild card, and then I have Detroit at 7-9.
So you see no chance of them making the postseason.
Well, they won so many fluky games last year that
kind of like the Vikings did the year before.
Kinda right.
If they regress to the mean like the Vikings did last year, we're looking at a 7-9 team. So
right. Even just off the top of my head, the 2 games they won against the Vikings, they probably shouldn't have.
Yeah. The Vikings were in control of their destiny, and they blew it on both of those games.
It took pretty epic collapses on both accounts for
sure.
Lions to win both of those games, and right there, that's 7-9. So, and then I got Chicago 6-10, and I'm probably giving Glennon or Trubisky, whichever one, too much credit here. Because the main reason I have Green Bay up so high is because of the quarterback position. So I should keep in consideration with the Bears the quarterback position and their disaster that they have there now. But I've said it before. I think that roster is much better than the perception. I remember I pretty sure I grouped the wide receiver group 3rd over Detroit, and I grouped their tight end group number 1, which I think was a very spicy take for some people in the division. But there's talent there, and I think it'll show in a few games this year. I think there'll be a tough test for a lot of, especially if Glennon and or Trubisky or whoever the heck plays quarterback. If they can play a solid game, this team will be tough to beat, I think. So,
I mean, if Glennon turns in like a Teddy Bridgewater type season, like a 14 touchdown, 6 interception type season with 3,000 yards, and they kind of bank on their defense, I don't think.
And Jordan Howard.
Yeah, Jordan Howard as well. I don't think that this team is a shoe-in to be the seller team. I think that Detroit.
Oh, they're not. Absolutely not.
Detroit is basically an injury away from Matthew Stafford from being 4-12 potentially. Right. Like you said last year, Matthew Stafford's the reason why they won a bunch of crazy games, right? Darius Slay obviously played a big role in that as well, as we know as Vikings fans. Yeah. But for the most part, that team keys on Matthew Stafford's ability to dominate down the stretch. And if he's not on the field, let's say he gets hurt week 2 and misses 4 or 5 games. I mean,
the same thing you can say about the Vikings too.
Right. And honestly, you can say the same thing about Green Bay. Imagine Green Bay, by the way, just pointing this out. I'm not wishing injury on anyone, but if Aaron Rodgers gets hurt and he misses like 6 weeks as he has in the past, I mean, he's not like a prone to injury guy, but it has happened in the past. That team falls apart at the seams because they don't have enough.
That happened in 2013. Remember that? They had like Seneca Wallace playing quarterback or something, and they that was the year they went like 8-7-1 and they won the division. Right. They just squeaked in there on the Week 17 win against the Bears. Yeah,
so it's funny because I think honestly, in terms of quarterback depth, Chicago might have the best quarterback depth. I don't know if that's hot or not, but they might, because so Rodgers goes down, they basically have nothing behind him. They bank on Aaron Rodgers just as we bank on like Harrison Smith or Xavier Rhodes. Vikings, if Sam Bradford goes down, my opinion, it'll be Taylor Heineke, possibly Teddy Bridgewater, but I mean, you know that story.
We should clarify, if Teddy Bridgewater is healthy, then there's no really debate about the quarterback depth.
Right.
Where this is kind of factoring that he likely won't play in 2017.
Right, exactly. Obviously, Teddy Bridgewater if he's healthy, he comes in relief. No doubt about that. Then behind Matthew Stafford, I mean, I think it's like Brad Kaya. They drafted him this year, so that's not the worst thing ever. I feel like he's kind of at this point in their careers, kind of on similar pedestal as a guy like Mitch Trubisky. So, Detroit kind of falls apart. Chicago has their potential guy in Trubisky. The Vikings have Heineke. A lot of potential behind these starters, with Green Bay really being the one team that kind of falls apart at the seams if they lose their signal caller. So maybe this is something that we'll have to talk about at some point this season if one of these guys does go down. But I think it's like you said, it's pretty clear cut that the Vikings, Lions, and Packers are going to be the teams jockeying for that top spot in the North. Even in June, I feel very comfortable saying that. And I think that if you look at the future and you look into your crystal ball and you try to predict something, I think that Drew's going with the safe pick here and betting on the best quarterback. I'm betting on the best defense. So I'm kind of playing. I'm kind of the 2000. I'm a little out of my years here, betting on defense over the quarterback positions. This is kind of more of like a 2005 take. I feel like betting on defense and a strong running game to win the division.
Yeah.
So either Vikings or Packers. I think that we've established that. So let's jump into our take 5 here. Like we've been doing, we're going to continue kind of with the fun personality weighed segments. We're doing our favorite places that we have personally traveled to or visited. And so if you're that's probably the end of the Vikings content for this podcast. So if you want to go ahead and turn this off, you're more
maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. We could go on a tangent. Hint. Yeah. Okay, so let's hop right into this through take 5 favorite places you've personally traveled to.
All right, this is going to go kind of all over the place because there are some spots here where they're completely different from each other. Number 5 is the Badlands in South Dakota. Out west river. It's obviously you have to go at the right time of year and the right time of day too, but it's a pretty cool scene to kind of there are special viewing spots that they give you out there, and I've been there a couple times with the family and some trips, and it's really remarkable what the earth itself kind of just created there. So That I always thought that was cool just to look at. Obviously, don't be there for more than like an hour, but you'll enjoy that half hour, 45 minutes you're there. It's kind of surreal, and you'll get some really cool pictures as well. Now, completely different here at number 4 is Times Square. Literally the complete opposite, pretty much, of middle of nowhere, South Dakota.
Literally the complete opposite.
Oh, I know. But we went through our school. We're given an opportunity to go to D.C. and then New York for a kind of a school trip thing when I was in 8th grade. And so we got to go to Times Square as part of it, and it's sweet. Times Square is sweet. It's. I mean, they say everything's bigger in New York. Well, they actually said about Texas, but the lights are brighter in New York. That part's true. Yeah, that's true.
It is the Big Apple.
It is weird because it's like 11 at night there, and it actually you look around and you really don't even notice that it's night out. But that's pretty sweet. Number 3 is U.S. Bank Stadium. That's where I was saying that the Vikings stuff won't end because U.S. Bank Stadium. U.S. Bank Stadium is a legit NFL, legit sports arena, stadium, etc. It is of the highest quality that I've ever been to. It's electric, and fortunately, the Vikings are 1-0 when I'm there. So hopefully, I can get to more games this year. Number 2 is just downtown Minneapolis. I'm staying local for the most part here, but in my experience here, especially being at St. John's. And when I get to go to the cities and it kind of in the surrounding area as well, it feels like a nice place to eventually live, which is kind of where I'm trying to get to eventually. I'm not out of college yet. It's awesome. It's just awesome walking around downtown Minneapolis. So many cool things to do. And then number 1 is Collegeville. As a Johnny, it's been my home, or at least one of my homes, for the last 3 years. There's nothing like it. It has kind of the, you're not far from the big city. You're not far from Minneapolis, about an hour away, but you're kind of, the campus itself is kind of placed in the middle of nowhere, in its own little spot, surrounded by a few lakes. Absolutely just unreal scenery around it. And then obviously the campus and the traditions, the people, it's all wonderful. And for anyone that is a high school sophomore or junior that's still looking for a college, I highly recommend St. John's University. But anyway, to recap, 5 is Badlands, 4 is Times Square, 3 is U.S. Bank Stadium, 2 is downtown Minneapolis, number 1 is Collegeville.
All right, so I'm completely different than Drew, right? So I'm actually not the type of person who enjoys traveling. I actually hate traveling. I think it sucks. I don't mind plane rides and that type of stuff, but I'm just not the type of person who likes to travel. But for whatever reason...
I'm kind of with you on that, though.
Yeah.
We went down to Florida here, and I hated it. That's not that I hated it, but it was a little bit overrated, I guess, is how I put it.
So I have happened to have the luxury of traveling to a lot of places, which... It kind of sucks because it's the type of privilege where I fell into it, and I kind of wish someone else had the opportunity instead of me because I'm not someone that enjoys traveling. But I have been to a lot of places, so I'll start with my honorable mentions here. For number 1 honorable mention, Alaska. Shout out to Adam Warwis. I know you love that place as well. That's a place that I visited on a cruise with my family when I was very young. It's a beautiful place. It gets kind of a bad name because of just the kind of perpetual winter and kind of nighttime feel that a lot of people know. But it's a beautiful place during the right time of the year. It's kind of like the Badlands in that regard, where if you see it at the right place, the glaciers are absolutely beautiful. And, like I said, I'm a man. I don't use the word beautiful often, so take that with a grain of salt, I would say. Another honorable mention, South America in general, particularly Venezuela, and kind of the rainforest down there was one of my favorite places as a kid. A place that I had the opportunity to visit, and I actually held a sloth down there, which is kind of my spirit animal. So I was a big fan of doing that kind of stuff. Couple of spring break locations for any of our younger listeners, people that are looking for somewhere to go next year. I really, really enjoyed Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic. They've got some great deals out there for if you've got a bunch of buddies. We signed in with like an 100-person package, and it was very cheap for us, so it was a bunch of fun. Highly recommend that. Also, I drove down to Panama City Beach my sophomore year at Marquette, and that was a ton of fun as well. So highly recommend both of those places. I'll actually have one more spring break location on my actual top 5, but those ones. And then One more honorable mention here, Milwaukee. This was my home for 4 years when I was at Marquette. This is a place that I would never want to live now. Looking back at Milwaukee, it smells really bad. It's not exactly a place that I'd want to live, but in terms of being the optimal place for partying and having a good time, good social experience as a college student, man, Milwaukee was just an absolute blast. So high praise for that place in that regard. So if you're looking for a good bar town, Milwaukee is as advertised in that regard. So from there, let's hop into my actual top 5 here. Coming in at number 5 is Spain in general. I had the opportunity to study abroad, and so I visited a lot of places across Spain. I didn't have the opportunity to visit Barcelona, unfortunately, because that was a place that I really wanted to see, but Madrid has a special place for me. That's where I stayed for the large part of about a 30-day study abroad vacation, and it was the place where I found the kind of the inner culture that you need to speak Spanish at beyond kind of a native, like kind of on a native level.
Yeah, right.
It forced me to grow up in that regard. For example, I stayed in a college place during the summer, and they only spoke Spanish there. So I had to figure out how to operate in that place when they only spoke Spanish. So I wasn't eating unless I figured out how to speak Spanish, and I wouldn't know what I was eating unless I was able to ask them, what am I eating? So things like that are very important to my personal development. I hate people that say that study abroad changed my life. It didn't change my life, but it certainly helped shape my person. So that place, Spain in general, Asturias, the Las Montañas de Europa. Some of those places are hold a special spot in my heart. So that comes in at number 5. Number 4 for me, another special spot. The Virgin Islands. It was my mom's favorite spot. I was very close with my mom, and that was kind of something that she loved visiting. And so we went and stayed at St. Thomas, St. John quite a bit. Absolutely loved it there, both for the relaxation aspect, but I also loved bone fishing down there. I had a ton of fun doing that. That was the first place I ever deep sea fished. Just little things like that. It was kind of a lot of first-time experiences for me down in that area, so I really loved that place. Number 3, my absolute favorite spring break location, one of the absolute best 7-day periods of my life was down at South Padre Island at the bottom of Texas there, right on the border of Mexico. Dude, I mean, again, if this was an About the Booze podcast, I'd have a lot more stories for you, but it's not. So, I'll kind of leave it at that, but that's, holds a special place in my heart. That's where I got my tattoo on my butt.
Oh man, jeez!
Yeah, I've got an outline of Minnesota that says this is Twins territory with a TC in the middle on my left butt cheek, and I got that down in South Padre while I was on spring break. So, absolutely loved that place. Still love that tattoo. Not a regret of mine, for the record. And then number 2 for me, shout out to Brett Anderson, one of our guys here at VT Las Vegas. Dude, this is I consider it an adult wonderland. It's an adult theme park, pretty much. If you haven't had the opportunity to go to Las Vegas, and I should kind of say this with a bit of a caveat here. If you haven't had the opportunity to go to Las Vegas as a 21-year-old, just do it once. I don't care what your personality is like.
That's me.
I don't care if you're someone that isn't really into partying, drinking. That scene. There's something for everyone there. I'm personally a big gambler. I really enjoy playing blackjack. Poker. I had a lot of good fun. There I got to see Marquette play down there at the MGM. The MGM facilities there, and it was unbelievable. So just overall, I've never had a poor experience in Vegas. It's my favorite place to travel to. And number 1, which kind of wraps up my theme here of me not being a big traveler, my number 1 favorite spot of all time is Minnesota. There's a reason why I fought to come back here from Bismarck from the moment that I got to Bismarck. I absolutely love this place. Shout out to Bismarck, by the way. You don't make anywhere close to my top 5, but shout out to that place for what it did bring to my life. I just love Minnesota, everything about it. I like St. Paul more than Minneapolis. It's my home. It's where I went to high school. It's the place that I know every street of any, you know what I'm saying when I say that I know every single street. Yeah. I know every little. I know every
growing up, I had a lot less to memorize. Being in South Dakota, being in Watertown with. But yeah, I know what you mean.
I know every nook and cranny of that place, and it's special to me. And I have absolutely zero intention of ever leaving Minnesota. Once again, I'm hoping that my career path will always lead me back to the St. Paul, Minneapolis area, because it is, it's important to me. It's where I was raised. It's where I went to school. It's where I met all of my for the most part, I've got a couple of buddies still from Milwaukee and stuff like that, but most of my friends are native Minnesotans. I trust Minnesotans. I love you guys. You guys are the greatest, and this is just it's my favorite place in the world, and I don't think that will ever change. So that's my top 5. So to wrap that one up one more time, Minnesota comes in at number 1, no doubt. Las Vegas, the adult theme land, number 2. Number 3 is the best spring break location, in my personal opinion, South Padre Island, Texas. Number 4, I believe I said the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas, place that I did a lot of vacationing when I was very young. And then also finally, number 5, Spain, one of the ultimate kind of study abroad experiences, in my personal opinion. So
I think we need to do least favorite places for our next one.
I can
think
give you
could be
that
fun.
too.
I know you could, and I would assume Bismarck is on there, but I'm jumping.
I drove down to South Padre on top of Punta Cana. So if you think, for the record, for people who have never kind of done a cross country trip like that, 28 hours in a van with 9 other guys. Down to Punta Cana.
Jeez.
I saw a lot of weird stuff, so I think that's something we could probably do. So I would say look forward to the least 5 places we have traveled to next week's top 5. Excuse me, take 5. We'll have more Vikings stuff available. I think that's do you got any final thoughts here? Final things you want to say here, Drew, before we take us out?
I don't. This is the part of the season where we need our listeners more than ever, because there's not a whole lot of Viking stuff to talk about other than people drinking a very small, alcohol content drink. So, but we'll keep turning. We'll keep thinking of topics. And if you guys have any topic suggestions or questions, whatever it may be, you know where to find us on Twitter. Obviously
we're obviously
the
not
podcast
great
handle.
about asking for questions. We generally forget to do that, but we always record on Monday nights and Wednesday nights. So if you have any questions, we will. That's an absolute guarantee from both of us here. We will answer any thoughts or discuss any topics you bring up if you hit us up with those ahead of the recording. We'll try to do a better job using our Twitter account, which is at VikingsATL Pod. For the record, you can check out the podcast. If you're a new listener, make sure to subscribe on iTunes and or Stitcher, depending on which. If you're a Mac guy or a Windows guy, I guess. Google Play is also an option. iHeartRadio. You guys know all of this stuff, and make sure to watch us on YouTube. I think that we're getting better at being, fun to watch. We're working on it. I'm working on a little bit of a little hut here, putting this place together, and right now it's got blank walls behind me, but there should probably be some purple and gold up there at some point. And I'm obviously like to quick advertise Red Bull real quick, just to make sure that Drew understands that Red Bull is a very great drink for your consumption of caffeine every day, always.
Might as well bring Little Caesars on next time, but no, I'm pretty set on when I get to my house in August for the school year, I'll be setting up a nice little presentation for the YouTube audience.
So we do appreciate you guys that are watching on YouTube. I have seen the numbers kind of go up as we've worked on that. So thanks for checking us out in that regard. Hopefully it is fun to watch us. Let us know if we suck at putting together a good motion picture instead of just an audio installment. Let us know and tell us what we can do better. We're always open to kind of critical thinking, critiques. I don't care if you are a nobody that has never recorded a podcast in your life, or if you're the most dominant podcast czar of all time. I want to hear your thoughts. Let us know. You can hit us up on Twitter, like I said, at VikingsATL Pod. Myself, at Robert Reidell, it's Reidell, or at Drew Mahowald, MAHOWALD. And of course, make sure to check out Vikings Territory. Shout out to Sean Borman for keeping us afloat as I sort of kind of get my footing back here in Minnesota. And hopefully I will be getting back to in the writing department shortly here. So keep an eye on Vikings Territory. Keep an eye on the About the Labor podcast. And make sure to check out Brendan Gay, our actual sponsor. As much as we'd love to say that we sponsor both Red Bull and Little Caesars, Brendan Gay is the guy right now for us. He is our main guy, and make sure to check out his stand-up special August 10th, 7:30 and 9 o'clock. Get your tickets on BrendanBeingBrendan.com or theJokeJointComedyClub.com for $10 with the promo code Brendan, capital letters, BRENDA. Thanks for listening, folks, and we will check you out later on this week.